You know the exact feeling. You are pulling 80,000 pounds of freight up a long highway grade. The diesel block is roaring. You feel the heavy vibration right in the floorboard, and the truck feels completely unstoppable. Then, a tiny sensor no bigger than a spark plug throws a phantom code. Instantly, the throttle pedal goes dead under your boot. The computer takes over and locks you into a 5-mile-per-hour forced derate. You are trapped on the shoulder of the interstate, miles from a terminal, and totally helpless. That is the modern trucking nightmare. Owner-operators live in constant fear of it. Veteran mechanics just shake their heads at it. We used to build commercial diesel engines to be the most reliable machines on the planet. You bolted an engine to the frame rails and ran it for decades. Now, these trucks literally shut themselves down on purpose. Welcome to Truck Forensics. We expose the engineering failures and the hidden truth behind the heavy machinery that moves the world. Today, we are breaking down the $15,000 emission scam, destroying modern diesel engines. To understand why this hurts so badly, look at the brutal math. When a diesel particulate filter plugs up with its own soot, or a selective catalytic reduction system fails, it is a financial disaster. You are staring at a DPF and SCR replacement bill that routinely hits $15,000 to $20,000 at the dealership, and that is just the hardware. Industry fleet data proves that unplanned downtime costs an owner roughly $760 every single day that truck sits broken in the yard. A single emission system failure can absolutely bankrupt a good driver. But the part that really hurts is the truth under the hood. The actual heavy iron block is perfectly fine. The pistons and the crankshaft are ready to work. What failed was the fragile chemical plant bolted to the exhaust pipe. How did the industry walk away from million-mile reliability and replace it with a system engineered to choke itself to death? To answer that, you have to look at what we actually lost. Before the year 2007, the heavy-duty trucking industry had a gold standard. We are talking about the golden era of big iron. Engines like the legendary Caterpillar C15 and the early Detroit Series 60. These were not just pieces of metal. They were the absolute backbone of American freight. Talk to any veteran driver from that time. They will tell you that pushing a pre-emission diesel engine past 1 million miles before needing an in-frame rebuild was just standard business. The base engine would literally outlast the truck chassis it was bolted to. It was simple, mechanical perfection. You gave it clean air, you gave it fuel, and it pulled weight. Let me be completely straight with you right now. This is not a political video. We are not going to argue about government regulations or the environment. That is a debate for somebody else. Our only focus today is the pure mechanical reality of what happened to these trucks. We are exposing the raw engineering. If you want the unvarnished truth about heavy-duty mechanics without the corporate spin, hit the subscribe button right now. Now, let us look at the actual physics. That legendary million-mile standard did not just fade away naturally. It was actively destroyed. The industry took the most reliable power plants on Earth and forced them to use a fundamentally flawed concept to clean up the exhaust. They bolted on parts that attack the engine from the inside out. To understand exactly why your modern truck is breaking down, we have to pull back the curtain. We are going under the hood to look at the exact science of the failure. The first major failure point is the exhaust system, specifically the active regen cycle. When that diesel particulate filter fills up with soot, the engine has to clean it out. The computer commands the fuel injectors to dump raw fuel directly into the exhaust stream. It acts exactly like a blowtorch. It forces exhaust temperatures up to a blistering 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. This extreme heat is supposed to burn the soot to ash. But think about what that heat does to the surrounding metal. You are repeatedly baking your turbocharger housings and your exhaust manifolds at temperatures they were never originally meant to handle on a daily basis. The thermal fatigue is brutal. Over time, that constant baking literally cracks the metal and cooks the expensive components from the outside in. But the extreme heat is only half the problem. The real engine killer is exhaust gas recirculation, or EGR. I want you to imagine an Olympic runner sprinting a marathon. Now, put a heavy mask on that runner and force them to breathe their own exhaled breath. How long until they collapse? That is exactly what an EGR system does to your diesel block. It takes the hot, dirty, abrasive exhaust gas that the engine just pushed out, and it routes it directly back into the clean intake. You are forcing the engine to breathe its own soot. When you pump raw soot back into the cylinders, it mixes directly with the engine oil. Scientific wear analysis shows that this soot completely destroys the oil viscosity. The oil stops lubricating and starts acting like liquid sandpaper. It strips away the protective boundary film on the metal parts. It heavily scars the cylinder walls and chews through the piston rings. The engine is literally eating itself alive just to meet a tailpipe standard. Then you have the electronics. A modern heavy-duty truck relies on NOx sensors to measure emissions. These sensors sit right inside that extreme exhaust stream. They are constantly blasted with corrosive gas and carbon buildup. They are incredibly fragile. If one of these sensors drifts by just 20 degrees, it confuses the entire computer. The system panics. It overdoses the diesel exhaust fluid or underdoses it. Then it triggers the warning chime, drops the power, and leaves an 80,000-pound rig stranded on the shoulder. Any first-year mechanic can look at this setup and see the fatal flaw. Forcing a high-performance engine to breathe dirt and baking it at 1,100 degrees is a terrible idea. So, it brings up a very dark question. If a guy turning wrenches in a shop could see this disaster coming, how did the billion-dollar manufacturers not know? The honest answer is terrifying. They did know. They knew the physics was fundamentally bad, but the government deadlines were strict, and the fines for missing those targets were massive. So, the engine builders made a very cold, calculated gamble. They decided to rush totally untested technology out of the factory and let the truck owners deal with the actual fallout. The absolute worst example of this was the Navistar MaxxForce disaster. Around 2010, Navistar tried to beat the emission rules using a massive exhaust gas recirculation strategy for their 13 and 15-liter engines. They completely skipped using diesel exhaust fluid. It was a huge corporate bet, and it failed spectacularly. Those engines literally choked to death on their own soot. The coolers failed constantly. The intake air became heavily contaminated with raw oil. The power derates were endless. It was a mechanical nightmare that resulted in massive fleet lawsuits. Navistar ended up paying out huge confidential settlements and buying back thousands of trucks just to quiet the storm. But Navistar was definitely not alone in this mess. The entire industry was rushing flawed parts onto the highway. Look closely at the early Cummins ISX engines from that exact same era. Large fleets filed huge coordinated warranty claims because the extreme soot loading was destroying turbochargers prematurely. It was ruining the engine oil viscosity and leaving trucks stranded. Cummins was forced into making major warranty concessions just to keep angry fleet managers quiet. Then look at the PACCAR MX-13 engines. Serious lawsuits were filed claiming their integrated after-treatment systems caused repeated sudden shutdowns and completely destroyed business operations. The pattern across the industry is crystal clear. The biggest names in trucking bolted experimental chemistry sets to their legendary iron blocks. When those experimental systems predictably failed in the real world, the manufacturers hid behind giant legal teams. If you were a giant shipping corporation with highly paid lawyers, you got a secret settlement. You got your broken trucks replaced. But if you were a single owner-operator or a small family-run fleet, you were left completely holding the bag. You were the one standing at the dealership service desk, staring at a massive repair bill, wondering how you were going to make your truck payment. The manufacturers pushed the true cost of their bad engineering directly onto the American working class. They sacrificed the legendary reliability of the commercial truck just to pass a tailpipe test on a factory floor. But selling you a flawed engine was only phase 1. Phase 2 is how they legally force you to keep paying for it. The manufacturers use the Clean Air Act as their perfect excuse. They claim the government forces them to heavily encrypt your engine control module. Because of that encryption, an independent shop is legally locked out from fixing your truck. When a fragile sensor throws a phantom code and forces a power derate, you cannot clear it yourself. You have absolutely zero choice but to tow your rig straight to an authorized dealership. Industry surveys show these dealers will charge you anywhere from $300 to $500 just to plug in a laptop. They hit a few buttons, clear the code, and hand you the bill. This is an engineered monopoly. They built an exhaust system that breaks constantly, and then they made sure nobody else is allowed to fix it. You are trapped, paying a ransom just to keep your own wheels turning. But forcing you into the dealership is only one piece of the puzzle. The deeper reason why the best technicians are walking away from this industry is much worse. Click the video on your screen right now to find out exactly why million-mile mechanics completely refuse to touch 2026 trucks.